there, miss. Good Fox 2.
Is that where you lock them up?
15 seconds. 3, 2, 7, and we're live.
Tonight on Fox 2 News at 10.
Welcome back. We've been watching it happen all night long. Protests in downtown Detroit. We continue our team coverage with Fox 2's Jessica Dubnak. Jessica, what's going on now?
I want to read you guys a little bit of an update in the police. We are behind the line. So right here, you had some protesters that kind of came behind the police line, and these officers reacted to that. They've maintained sort of a perimeter that you're looking at now, and those folks that you saw screaming came behind that perimeter, causing those officers to react. Police continue to push the protesters down right now. For perspective, we're right in front of MGM Casino, heading towards the highway. Those explosions, I am guessing, although I cannot see, would be tear gas. There was an announcement a little bit ago, a warning over the loudspeaker, and typically when that warning comes, tear gas is quick to follow. But again, these officers getting set off, if you will, a little while ago when projectiles started getting thrown at them, and really those chemical grenades is really what did it and caused things to escalate here.
We're watching right now kind of the line with the SWAT truck in the middle. Is there any sort of tactic to push them back, or are they trying to maintain? Can you get a vantage point from where you are?
We saw yesterday happening is as you push a crowd back, they start to splinter off on side streets. So it's not only pushing them back, it's causing them to dismantle, and that really is the goal. And last night we saw it took several hours for them to dismantle the crowd, and I'd say the crowd is bigger and angrier tonight as we see direct harm trying or attempting to be done at officers. And I gotta tell you that chemical grenade itself is awful to be a part of. The officers wiped their faces and then went right back on the line. It does appear that they're making some headway. Scott, let's walk a little bit. Again, we want to be mindful of that chemical smell as it moves very quickly. It's kind of windy here in Detroit, but they are making progress, folks, down 3rd Street past MGM. They're moving at a more rapid pace. We can't see on the other side to see how many protesters are actually still there, but earlier when things really erupted here outside of DP, had a crowd of about 250 or so.
And I know that you were out there last night in a very similar situation. Would you describe the police and the riot gear as more or less tonight, this time around?
I think that Detroit police beefed up their presence here, starting early, around 4 o'clock when we got down here. I've covered many protests, and here the Detroit police were maybe not as prepared as they thought, given the amount of people in the crowd. Definitely police down here handling the crowd. And you also saw earlier, and we're kind of looking at the back of those flashing lights. Those are the tactical units that they're using. I don't want to say as a ram, but it does sort of move the crowd, and that's probably what's helping to move the crowd a little bit faster than it did last night when you didn't have any of those vehicles over in Cadillac Square.
So where you're standing now, you can see kind of people walking with obviously they're in police custody, but are people trying to breach that line? Hold on, before you answer that question, we're going to go to Camille Amiri, who is live now.
Started out as a civil protest, very peaceful, orderly. At some point, they decided they wanted to go on a walking tour of the area. In fact, decided to take over a freeway. Fortunately, that section of the freeway shut down. We certainly didn't want to put anybody in harm's way. After that, they decided to leave the freeway, return, coming towards headquarters. They stopped near Hart Plaza. We could tell that they were getting somewhat agitated. We just knew. And so they decided to leave that location where they proceeded heading back quarters. We did not want them to come too close to our building for obvious reasons. And that's when the protesters became violent. They began to throw projectiles from M80 grenades at officers. And so we learned that many of them came and was with ice chests had bricks. So it became a violent situation at that point. We're talking roughly 250, a much smaller that we saw yesterday, but certainly at this point somewhat more agitated. So we did give the order to deploy gas and non-lethal munitions. Very effective. It did disperse the group. So right now we're getting feedback that it is dispersed, but not. But again, very patient. Officers were professional all night. We allowed them to go onto the freeway, but we knew that they were not in danger because we had restricted access by motor vehicle traffic. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Like you mentioned, we've been out here all day since about 5 o'clock. Your officers were very patient the entire time. They allowed the troops to march. What was that initial factor that said, okay, enough is enough?
Well, you know, again, if they were just going to stand there, you know, we're patient. But when you start attacking the police officers, that's when enough is enough. Certainly when you're talking about projectiles from small-sized bricks, fireworks that certainly could have caused significant injury to an officer. And so we had no other choice. It was a safety issue for the officers. And again, very cooperative, tried to work. Even our, what was real disappointing is that many of our activists who had been on the ground tonight tried to engage some of the protesters. They could see the agitation. They said, look, I can't do it, and decided to leave. So right now we've arrested 5. I don't have many more details than that, but we're hoping that the crowd is fully dispersed at this hour.
What about tomorrow night? Many of them say we're going to return tomorrow night. Are you expecting the same?
You know what? We're going to treat the same way we did tonight. We're going to be here in full force. We're going to continue to remain very professional. Again, we support the protests. We do not support law breakers. It's just not going to happen. One of our cars got damaged again tonight. Not as significant as last night. We had one window knocked out. But again, we're not going to tolerate law breaking. We support the issue. We want to continue to work with you and allow you the freedom to do so, but you're not going to impugn, you're not going to have an impact on public safety. It's not going to happen.
You mentioned earlier as far as the protesters not being from this area. Do we know if that was the case tonight? Were they from other areas?
Well, we didn't make a substantial number of arrests last night. Not as many tonight. Again, we believed that tonight was going to be uneventful, but we were prepared in the event. But clearly we could see that the agitation of the group was starting to grow. And it was at that point we said, you know, and then they started propelling various objects at the officers. But what's concerning was the fireworks.
Any injuries that you know of civilians or their officers?
I'm unaware. I think some of our officers were affected by the gas. Any reports of injuries tonight?
Chief, can you just catch us up for tonight? We just joined your press conference, and our viewers are watching you. We just saw things escalate right here outside headquarters.
Can you get your mask
break it
up?
down to us?
So, as I explained, the protesters clearly, we allowed them to go onto a restricted freeway, and it was during that time that we were patient. We allowed them to protest. We could see at one point the group was becoming more and more heated. They ended up over at Hart Plaza. It was at that point I was monitoring that phase of it, and then I started getting back to headquarters. Certainly concerned for the security of the building, and it was at that point when we stopped us, they began to propel objects in the direction of the officers. I reported out to your colleagues, fireworks, M80s to be exact, bricks. But we've learned that many of these protesters came in with ice chests on wheels, and inside of them were bricks. So they came here clearly with the intention to be violent.
Chief Craig, are officers trained to remain calm in such situations like that? I've been out here all afternoon, and they were calm the entire time. Is that part of the training?
That is part of the training. I will tell you, the officers are so professional. Starting, again, I always talk about how long I've been in the business, 44 years. I don't know if I would have had that level of patience, but I will tell you I'm very proud of the work that they did yesterday, the work they did tonight, and just sitting out here with them well over 5 hours.
How long do you anticipate to be out here tonight?
Well, because of our last deployment of gas in response to the attack or the violent actions on the behalf of these protesters, they started to break up.
Can you talk about the manpower that was involved in not just last night as well?
We had similar staffing tonight, very similar to what we had last night. I still maintain that we were sufficiently staffed to address what we had to deal with. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And you just heard there from the top cop there, Detroit Police Chief James Craig. Just to recap what he said that for the most part, the protest that we went on for most of the day, starting at 4 p.m., was done peacefully. Then things escalated once they made their way back towards Detroit Police Headquarters. That's where police set up. He mentioned that some of the demonstrators, there were about 250, lingered well into the evening, and they are hoping at this point that things are dying down. But they came here with the intentions of inciting violence with coolers full of bricks, rocks, and M80 fireworks. Then they tried to calm those protesters, maintaining that line. Police did. There were 5 arrests. We watched a number of them unfold on the air here. You watched it as well. 1 damaged police. Reports of any injuries to this point. That's good news. He was asked about for a demonstration that will likely take place tomorrow at 4 a.m. And then that they were supporting the protests, but not the lawbreakers, and that's when they were going to interfere and fire off the tear canisters and the chemical canisters to disperse the crowd. They thought that this was going to be uneventful, given the size of the crowd, and again, things escalated when the fireworks began to be hurled. We watched our own Jessica Dupnack there in the midst of it, breathing in some of those chemicals and describing the horrible sensation and the need to get out of there. And thankfully, she and our other reporter, Camille, are in safe, and things are beginning to wind down now. Do we have Jessica standing by? Is that
Yes.
Hi, Jessica. So kind of describe what you're seeing now.
So it really is a sense of closure here on 3rd Street, coming up to the highway, the overpass here. These officers are actually taking off their masks and some of their riot gear. That is a symbol that we saw last night. That things are, as far as I can see, and I'll have you peek around here the corner, they still have this road blocked off, but there really aren't any stragglers or protesters that we can see. The officers, you can just tell in their posture that things have definitely calmed down. So it does appear, and it is said, that it has dismantled here this evening. Now again, another protest called for 4 o'clock tomorrow outside of Detroit Police Headquarters. And today's agenda, if you will, followed very similar to yesterday, a very peaceful protest. And then as darkness fell, things got a bit chaotic, and you saw it here right on our air happening yesterday. Today, it begs the question, what will happen tomorrow? As again, folks are expected to assemble at DPD headquarters again at 4 p.m. But as you see behind me, it does appear that things are under control for the night. Yesterday, after the masks came off, they walked back and went home. A lot of those, thankfully, no injuries. Several officers injured last night. The chief did not mention any injuries there in his recap, but it is a sad day for Detroit. It's sad to see that things escalated, and you did see a lot of community leaders stepping in, trying to break this up. I saw a guy stand behind a tree, and he said, "I tried, man, I tried," and he did. There were people out here to keep this peaceful, but as the night went on, it did get out of control. Detroit police forced to do and use the tactics that they did after they were getting hit with projectiles, thrown fireworks. But I'll send it back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Jessica. And after what you've been through in the last 2 days, I am glad and thankful that you are doing okay and recovering after what you've endured. So go home, get some rest, and be safe. We'll be covering this tomorrow. We're going to check in now with Camille Amiri, who was just listening in to the chief. And Camille, he was talking about how they tried to maintain peace, even letting them get on the highway, and then obviously setting up that perimeter, but he mentioned a point broke down and they had to intervene.
Right. The chief was basically, you heard him the whole time, and he's saying they did everything they could, and we watched them hour after hour, just so patient and trailing the protesters and even walking with them at work and, blocking off roads so they could walk in the roads and just doing everything that seemed to be the right thing and being antagonized when they were trying to say, the F word to the police. And, we saw this hour after hour, and then it was just, we thought things were going to end peacefully, and then boom, just like that, things got crazy, just like Jessica described last night. So another day tomorrow, they're talking about having another protest. We don't know who these people are that are inciting this violence. You heard from all the community leaders and chief and the mayor saying these are not Detroiters. These are not people who are necessarily even that vested in Black Lives Matter, but more vested in just causing problems, causing trouble, inciting violence. You heard him say that they brought coolers full of bricks. We saw the fireworks. We saw, them on their cars. I mean, so much that they didn't come here. Those people did not come here for protest. They obviously brought things because they knew this is what they wanted to do, and they knew this is how things would end up. Another thing that Chief talked about was the community leaders. Pastor Mo in particular was down here. He was working with everybody, and he was working with the organizers and the majority of the protesters, and they were peaceful. And then, you heard what Jessica said, and Pastor Mo said, I tried everything I could. So, this is tough, and we haven't seen the rioting that we've seen in Minneapolis and other cities, but still hard. This is hard to see happen, and we hope that it doesn't get worse as the days and weeks, obviously, go on. And we need to talk about the fact that we're still in a global pandemic. This is still, coronavirus is still here, and Detroit was one of the hot spots. And one of the things that community leaders talked about earlier today is that we hope that there isn't another spike in Detroit, because there are so many people out here, so many people in close quarters not wearing masks and practicing social distancing. So, the helicopters are still above, but this is quiet. The police have all walked by, taken their gear off. I think it's safe to say that this is over for tonight. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't think anybody knows. But, we'll just have to wait and see and be prepared for the worst and keep our fingers crossed that it won't be as bad as it has been the past 2 nights.
And one thing that maybe we could take solace in, and coming from Chief Craig, is that the numbers were smaller than they were yesterday, albeit more violent, but there were no injuries. So while there was
stated that these people were from out of state, they're just here causing trouble.
As well. Camille Amiri reporting live for
They don't even live in the state of Michigan.
Thank you enough.